I remember very specifically during my freshman year of college while I was pledging a fraternity, we had to meet with every single member of the fraternity and get their signature in order to initiate in the fraternity. Well, there was one group of older men that us pledges feared meeting with. They were a group of older, devoutly Christian men, and they were dubbed the God Squad. And we feared meeting with them because we knew when we went to go meet with them to get their signature, they were going to talk to us about Jesus. And I can promise you, I did not join a fraternity to talk to anybody about Jesus. So I remember my very first meeting of one of the members of the God Squad, and it was at a Starbucks, and I see him off in the distance, and I'm walking that way, and as I get closer, I notice there's something on the table. And as I get even closer, I notice that it's a Bible. And immediately I freeze, and I'm like, this is not what I signed up for. But I have to say that these meetings with members of the God Squad planted a seed that would grow and grow later. You know, I grew up a very nominal and lukewarm Catholic. Went to Mass most Sundays, my Sunday religious education, and said a prayer before dinner every night and a prayer before bed. But other than that, my relationship with God was pretty much non-existent. I got confirmed in 8th grade, and at this point started to gradually drift away from church and started to go less and less often. I get to my freshman year of college and I go off to college, and my whole life I'd heard that college is the best 4 years of your life. And that was what I wanted my college experience to be. So I joined a fraternity my freshman year. And just looking back at those meetings with the members of the God Squad, there was about 6 or 7 of them, and they all had about the same story. They went off to college, did all of the partying, drug, sex, alcohol, had a conversion to their faith, had a conversion to Jesus, and they'd never been happier before. And I remember listening to the stories, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is crazy. I just had never heard anything like that. But their stories impacted me enough that after I joined the fraternity, I got my own Bible and committed to reading one page of the Bible every single night before bed. And for anyone who has tried reading the Bible before without knowing anything about it, I start in the book of Genesis, and it's interesting with all the stories at the beginning, and then I get to the book of Leviticus, and I'm like, what in the heck am I reading? But the members of the God Squad got me to start doing that. Now, when I went off to college, I abandoned my faith completely. I didn't go to church at all. It wasn't like Sunday came around and I made a conscious decision not to go to Mass on Sundays. Sunday came around and I didn't even think of the option of going to church. That's how far everything was from my mind. And basically my first year and a half of college consisted of study, party, study, party. My degree was in chemical engineering, so I had to study a lot, and I would study during the weekend, and then Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night would come, and I would party, party, party. Drinking as much as I can, engaging in the hookup culture, doing recreational drugs. Now, I'm at home during Christmas break of my sophomore year, and I'm starting to realize that I think my college experience can be more than it is, can be more than just studying and partying. So I made a list of items that I wanted to get involved with and start doing when I went back to school. And by God's grace, one of those things was making a New Year's resolution to start going back to Mass. So I go back to school and look up a local church near me and find a Newman Center there, and that's where I start going to Mass. Now, this next semester was huge for me because I started to have 2 big realizations. My first realization was I wasn't actually happy. Now, I wasn't depressed, I didn't have anxiety or anything like that, but I had this sense that there had to be something more to life. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, if I was a senior in college, or senior in high school, and I asked myself, what do you think you need to have a great college experience? And I was like, well, if you have maybe these 5 things, you're going to have a phenomenal college experience. Well, I'm sitting there, it's my 4th semester in college, and I'm like, I have all these things. I had a great degree, a great major. I was doing really well in school with great grades. I had a phenomenal engineering internship lined up the next summer that was high paid, very highly sought after. I was in a fraternity, I was doing all the partying, I had friends, everything was fine financially, I had scholarships to school. And so I thought, what am I missing? And I remember at that point when I asked myself that, I said, I don't know. And the fact that I answered, I don't know, was very unsettling to me. My second realization was all of this partying and this party lifestyle wasn't actually leading to my happiness. Yeah, I would get temporary highs during certain times of the week, but it wasn't a fulfilling lifestyle. But I just could not imagine being in college and living some other way. So I kind of came to the conclusion that I'll graduate college and then worry about all of this after I graduate. But right now, this is just how you live in college. soon after this, one of my friends in the fraternity started up a fraternity Bible study. And I was one of his friends, so he invited me. And I don't know what I looked like externally when he invited me, but internally I was like, absolutely not. I had never been to a Bible study before. I didn't know what they did in Bible studies. I kind of had all these weird images in my mind of people touching each other and praying for each other and speaking in tongues. And I have no idea where these images came from, but that's what I thought of. So I kept saying no. I have school work to do. I have to study. They were all lies, but I really just did not want to go. But he kept inviting me, and he was my friend. So I eventually said yes. And I remember my very first ever Bible study. It was just me and him, and we went to a Waffle House. Because where else better to have a Bible study? And it actually wasn't a Bible study. He gave me this short little passage to read of this disease that swept the world, and there was one little boy's blood that could save it, but they had to take all of it, and the sacrifice that this little boy and the father had to make, and it related it to the sacrifice of Jesus and the Father. And the story just punched me right in the gut. And I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. And I remember going home that night, and probably for the first time in my life, really thinking about my relationship with God, or really the lack thereof. So this next summer, I go off to this engineering internship, and my friend gives me this book to read called Rediscovering Catholicism by Matthew Kelly. I'm not much of a reader, but he was my friend, so I decided to read the book. So I'm going through and reading this book, and I'm thinking, wow, this stuff is actually pretty cool. Why did I not know any of this? I probably had about a second grade knowledge of Catholicism at that point in my life. So I'm reading this book, and there's a chapter on confession, and I read the chapter on confession and think, uh-oh, I need to go to confession. You see, because at that point in my life, I'd only ever been once before, and that was for my first reconciliation in second grade. I just didn't know confession was a thing that you did. Like, I had a very Hollywood understanding that, okay, maybe you're about to die, or maybe you've committed a murder or some terrible act, then you go to confession. Well, I'm like, well, I haven't killed anybody. I don't think I'm about to die, so I guess I don't need to go to confession. But I ended up looking up a local church, finding the confession times, and went to confession for the second time ever in my life. So I get back to college my junior year, and it's pretty much the same thing. Study during the week, party on the weekends. But I'm really starting to have this internal struggle because I just feel like there has to be something more to life than this. Now, this friend that started up the Bible study, we started to develop a really good Christian friendship where we would just meet and talk about life and what we wanted out of life. And he challenged me to start doing two things. One, start going to daily mass during the week. And just to give you an idea of where I was at that time, I said, what's that? I had no idea what daily mass was. I didn't know they had daily mass during the week, but he said it was a really peaceful thing. It was only 30 minutes. And I was like, okay, that's something I can do. And to start going to confession once a week. So I started going to daily mass 3 times a week and confession once a week. And as I was doing this, what happened was this tight grip that I had on sin started to loosen, and I started to let go. And I remember one night laying in bed, thinking about all that was happening. And I had this thought, you know, I just don't want to get drunk anymore. And right as I said that, I caught myself. And I said, what did you just say? Because at that point in my life, I had heard someone a couple months earlier say, you know, you really shouldn't pray that God helps you stop sinning. What you should do is pray that God takes away your love of sin. So for a while, I had been doing that. I had been praying and saying, Lord, take away my love of sin. I don't really know what this means, but please take away my love of sin. And at that moment in bed, I realized that God had answered that prayer, and it brought me to tears. And at that moment, I made a commitment to really start following my faith and living the Christian lifestyle. My life took about a complete 180. So much so that I would have friends come up to me in the weeks and months after this and be like, Brian, what happened? And I didn't really know. I mean, it was so new to me, I didn't know how to describe it. But I eventually got connected with a missionary at my local Newman Center and with our local chaplain. And they just started to walk me through basic things. How do you pray? What is prayer? How do you live as a Christian? What does the Christian lifestyle consist of? And they just taught me how to have a relationship with God. I eventually went off to a Catholic conference over my Christmas break. And, you know, at this point, I knew I wanted to take my faith seriously. And I had my one friend who's led the Bible study, but I didn't really know who else I would hang out with. And I thought about all the students at the Catholic Center, and to me, I just thought they were weird and just not my crowd. But I get off to this conference and I meet and hang out with a lot of these students at my local Newman Center, and I find out they're really cool. They're really normal people. And then I'm surrounded by 3,000 other college students from around the country who are on fire with their love of Jesus Christ. And it just blew me away and it set me on fire. I had a moment of prayer during this conference where I probably experienced and encountered the person of Jesus Christ for the first time in my life. And that changed everything. It set me on fire. And I leave and I go back to school and I'm the one leading my fraternity Bible study. I'm the one going to all my friends and sitting down with them and be like, look, I want to tell you what great thing God has done for my life. Now, soon, someone gave me a book called Rome Sweet Home by Scott Hahn. And at this point, I thought Catholics, Protestants, they're all about the same. Maybe it looks a little different what you do on Sunday. Well, I'm reading this book and realize that there are big differences between the two. And I'm just captivated by the truth of Catholicism. So much so that I never liked reading growing up, but at this point in my life, I'm reading about a book a week on my faith. I could not get enough. I just wanted more, more, more. And how earlier on I had a conversion of heart, now I had a conversion of mind, and I was completely on fire. The next 2 summers, I ended up doing this program called Totus Tuus, where I was a Totus Tuus missionary, and my summers were dedicated to evangelizing high school and grade school students. And this was the first time in my life that I ever got to talk and teach about my faith all day, every day, and I loved it. It brought me such life. I realized I was really good at it, and I knew that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I was like, why had no one ever told me about this before? I want to spend the rest of my life telling people about Jesus and bringing people to him. I ended up graduating with my degree in chemical engineering. And at that point, I had discerned God was calling me to the priesthood or to go to seminary. So I went to seminary and spent 2 years in seminary. In my second year, with the help of a spiritual director and the rector of the seminary, I had discerned that God wasn't calling me to the priesthood, but to be a lay evangelist and to spread my faith as a layperson. I had an amazing opportunity then to go and live and study in Belgium for 2 years, where I got my master's degree in theology at the Catholic University of Leuven in Leuven, Belgium. And I was there when COVID happened, and COVID brought me back home, and I was able to go and join Focus and be a Focus missionary for 2 years and do full-time evangelization of college students. And then I spent 2 years as the director of campus ministry at the Catholic Newman Center at the University of Kentucky. And I've since left and started up Culturally Catholic because I think that there's nothing more important, nothing more needed, nothing more urgent today than the proclamation of the gospel. The mission of Culturally Catholic Ministries is to prepare the way of the Lord. And just like John the Baptist prepared the way so that people can encounter Christ more easily, that is the mission we have at Culturally Catholic, to prepare the way so that people can encounter Jesus Christ in the church that he created and have a truly Catholic worldview.